I am an associate professor of anthropology at the University of Missouri in Kansas City, and I am very excited to be here. I think most of you know that by now. In part because I'm currently in the very early stages of developing a new research project on death in the digital age. And it's just been really wonderful to listen to all of the presentations here, and it's given me a lot to think about. And the project is going to focus, it might be overambitious, but the plan is that the project will focus on 3 groups of actors who are all involved in integrating digital technologies into people's responses to and preparations for death. So I want to focus on the technicians and entrepreneurs who are designing new products and services for death in the digital age, so that would include some of you in this room. I want to focus on grief counselors who are using digital technologies to administer to their clients, and I'm going to focus on digital mourners. And in triangulating between these different groups, I'm basically interested in exploring how experiences of loss and mourning and memorialization are changing in the digital age. How are digital technologies perhaps reconfiguring the experiential and conceptual boundaries between life and death? And what do these, or how might all of these changes ultimately be reflective and even generative of new understandings of what it means to be human? So the paper I'm presenting today provides one very limited entry point into these issues, and it's based on online research that I've been doing for over 1.5 years now. My ultimate goal is to develop the ethnographic component of the project because I think it's desperately needed, but I haven't gotten that far yet. I also want to warn you, I have no slides. I'm going old school here. So I'll try to do a dramatic reading of the paper to keep your interest. We'll see how that goes. Okay, so as everybody here is aware, over the last 10, 15, 20 years, scholars from a range of disciplines have become interested in studying the ways that people use the internet to memorialize the dead. And they've looked at how online memorialization both reproduces and reconfigures traditional mortuary rituals and practices. And one of the changes that's frequently noted in the literature, and that was noted in the last 2 presentations, but it's often not really explored in depth, one of the changes involves a shift in forms of mortuary writing. So instead of just commemorating the deceased with descriptive accounts of their lives and accomplishments, the bereaved are also using these online memorials to communicate with them. And this again was noted by Wendy and Elena. So for instance, in a content analysis of 244 memorial sites, gerontologists DeVries and Rutherford found that online memorials were more likely to be written to the deceased in a form of a letter rather than about or for the deceased, as would be the case with the traditional obituary. And scholars working in the field of information and computer sciences have also echoed this finding. Here I'm thinking of Brubaker and his colleagues. So taking this observation as a departure point, in what follows, I want to consider 3 questions. First, I want to ask, why do online memorials increasingly involve writing letters to the deceased? Second, how does the internet provide the bereaved with a new means to communicate with the dead, and also use the dead to communicate with living others? And third, how might these changes be reflective of new forms of consciousness and connectivity? So those are the 3 sort of guiding questions. And my discussion is going to draw upon data that I've been gathering from the American-based online memorial site, forevermissed.com. And over the past 1.5 years, I have been looking at hundreds of these memorials, which I have to say has been not only incredibly sad, but it has also made me feel incredibly creepy. I'm not totally comfortable with the voyeuristic nature of surfing the internet and peering into people's very personal and painful lives and expressions of suffering. And you express some of these concerns as well, Elena. But I also think that the fact that these very painful expressions of grief are being posted and shared in a public domain is part of what calls out for anthropological exploration. So today I'm going to focus on one extended example, and I've changed the names. That's also an issue that I've been grappling with. How do we treat this data? It comes from a memorial that was constructed to honor a 47-year-old man named George who died unexpectedly in April of 2014. And the site was constructed 2 days after his death. And as noted on the site, it was put together with the love of his daughters, Kim, 11 years old, and Rose, 8 years old, and his wife, Sarah. Now, the postings on George's memorial site resonate very closely with the findings of DeVries and Rutherford and others. More than 3/4 of the messages in the tribute box take the form of a letter or a message addressed directly to George. And one thing that was interesting is that in some cases, visitors to the site actually posted 2 messages, one expressing their condolences to the family, and then the other addressing George directly. And I'll read 2 examples. So the day the site was launched, George's 11-year-old daughter, Kim, who also goes by the nickname Coco, wrote the following. "Hi, Daddy. I miss you already. You were gone too soon, but you were a fighter. You will always be a part of my heart forever and ever. One day I'll see you again. I know God is taking care of you for us until we can see you again. Miss you, Dad. Love you, Coco." The day after the funeral, George's wife posted a message that began, "My dearest husband, George, we laid you to rest yesterday, which was not an easy thing for me. You are now our guardian angel, to watch over us as well as the friends and family we have. Rest now in peace, my love, as you make new friends in heaven and reunite with loved ones who have also departed. You are truly a 1 in a million, a diamond in the rough, as we used to say to each other. Love ya, all my love, Mama S." As Bakhtin might observe, in terms of their thematic content, style, compositional structure, and designated addressee, these letters to the deceased differ significantly from the more traditional genre of the obituary. The traditional obituary usually refers to the deceased in the third person and typically chronicles his or her public roles and accomplishments. It addresses an audience of acquaintances and strangers and provides a far less emotional summary of the deceased's life. By contrast, these letters address the deceased directly. They place much more emphasis on the unique relationship between the deceased and the bereaved, and they provide the bereaved with an opportunity to express their feelings. So, what are we to make of such shifts? I propose that these letters are indicative of more general trends and changes in our late modern intimate society. And when I refer to intimate society, I have Richard Sennett's 1974 book, The Fall of Public Man, in mind. And these include our contemporary obsession with self-disclosure and a pop therapeutic culture that privileges writing as an eminently cathartic technology of the self. And I think there are actually interesting parallels that could be drawn between the kinds of letters that populate these online memorial sites and other therapeutic contexts and spaces in which people are increasingly being encouraged to supplement the talking cure with the writing cure. And in fact, in doing the research for this paper, I came across a whole slew of books that have been recently published that promote the writing over the talking cure. And given the explosion of blogging and other forms of digital writing, I think there's something kind of interesting to think about there, but that's another paper. These letters also suggest that the embarrassment or silencing of grief and mourning in American society may be on the wane, or at least that expressions of grief may be rendered more acceptable in these online forums. So this brings us back to the issue Jacob was raising yesterday about the whole taboo nature of grief, and in what spaces might it be more or less taboo. But what interests me most about these letters is, again, that instead of just commemorating the life of the dearly departed, as obituaries tend to do, these posts reflect an ongoing dialogue with the deceased. They bespeak an attempt, or at least a desire, for continued connection and communication. And this desire for continued connection and communication can be vividly gleaned by looking at the number of recurring posts, right? People aren't just doing this once, they're doing it over months, sometimes over years. So I'll just read two more examples, a few more. Several days after her father's funeral, Kim posted the following. "Hi Dad, it's me again. We miss you so, so much. Lots of people came to visit again. Tell God we say thank you for taking care of you for us. You should see how much food we have in our fridge now. Talk to you tomorrow. Hugs and kisses, Coco." And in fact, she did talk to him the next day by posting another message on the memorial site. Similarly, George's wife, 6 weeks after he died, posted another message that began, "Good morning, my loving husband, a special day for you and I. Today is our 14th wedding anniversary." Then on Father's Day, she began a post with, "Hi, hon. Happy Father's Day. I and the girls miss you dearly." More recently, she began a post with, "Hi, hun. Our Kimmy did it. She completed her first duathlon yesterday with conviction." Now, in certain respects, these attempts to communicate with the deceased and keep him in the loop of family affairs are far from surprising. For as Robert Hertz observed long ago, and I'll quote him because he was much more eloquent, he said, "We cannot bring ourselves to consider the deceased as dead straight away. He is too much a part of our substance. We have put too much of ourselves into him, and participation in the same social life creates ties which are not to be severed in one day." But at another level, we must consider why these attempts to maintain connections with the deceased take the particular form that they do. Again, why post and write electronic messages to the deceased, and equally important, why post them on the internet to share them with others? Beyond the deceased, who exactly is the intended addressee? And the following post, in which George's wife recounts her visit to his grave, I think raises this set of issues. She writes, "My dearest George, we visited you today, a sunny fall day, another season without you. We laid some red roses with you and had the girls write a card to you," and here she puts in quotes what was inscribed in the card. "6 months without you seems like an eternity. All our love, Mama S, Kim, and Rose, and your loving friends and family." And then she ends the quote and continues, "No words can express the loss and void I feel without you here. I look at our girls and I see so much of you in them, which is a happy reminder of you. I love you. Hugs and kisses, Mama S." So in considering these questions, who exactly is the intended addressee? Why are people posting these messages online and sharing them with others? I want to draw upon the work of media theorist Josie Van Geek. And in her books, Mediated Memories in the Digital Age and the Culture of Connectivity, Van Geek explores how digital media and technology are reconfiguring the relationship between the public and private, memory and experience, and self and others. And Van Geek notes that in the digital age, technologies of the self are increasingly technologies of sharing. And she argues that memory objects and media technologies are now charged with a communicative as well as commemorative function. She says digital photographs are not only intended for veneration or ritual use, they also become virtual objects of exchange which are widely circulated and used to create connections with others. Now, Van Geek does not address the issue of online memorialization, but I think that this distinction that she's positing between the commemorative and communicative function of digital media and technologies is helpful in thinking about this whole phenomenon of online memorialization. And what I want to suggest is that by posting these letters online, the bereaved are not just expressing a desire for continued connection and communication with the deceased. They're also using the deceased and using these memorials as a way to connect and communicate with living others, and thereby, in classic Durkheimian fashion, ameliorate some of the pain, anguish, and rupture that the death of a loved one provokes. And this is something that has been hinted at in earlier presentations as well, that there's a kind of community building developing around these technologies and these sites. And I think that this interpretation finds support when we look at the testimonials that users of the site have provided. So I'll just read you two examples. The first one: "Bless your heart, whatever would I have done without this website? It's so comforting to talk to my sister through the tributes, share stories about her with people who remember her, as well as those who never knew her at all. I've even met other website administrators through Forever Mist, and we are now friends, sharing our grief, supporting one another. Thank you so very much." The second example: "I thank God for your service to help people like myself heal through communication. It's comforting to know I can come here and send loving thoughts to my sister who I lost 3 months ago. I'm still lost, so this site helps so much. Thank you." Now, given what I've proposed so far, I don't think it's surprising that in these testimonials, online memorialization is presented as a means for delivering God's grace. For in the wake of profound loss, it's clear that this practice enables the bereaved to feel as though they are a part of something greater than themselves. And it also provides them with a way to actively contribute to what Durkheim referred to as the perpetuity of the soul. And here I just want to take a minute to note that this kind of intertwining of the technological and the spiritual is something that has been remarked upon by many scholars. In fact, the concept of the internet as a techno-spiritual system was introduced by Genevieve Bell in 2006, and she basically uses this concept to refer to the ways that people appropriate communication technologies for spiritual ends. And in the last 10 years, anthropologists have generated some really interesting studies regarding the ways that people's religious beliefs shape their appropriation or use of technology. Now, alternatively, computer designers have approached the whole idea of the techno-spiritual from a slightly different vantage point. And they've been interested in asking how the ethereal qualities of these technologies might make them particularly conducive for generating spiritual experiences. So on the one hand, we have anthropologists saying, how do people's beliefs shape the way people use technology? On the other hand, we have computer scientists and designers asking, how do the very technical properties of digital media potentially enhance the experience of having a spiritual experience? And I think that both of these perspectives are important and interesting and useful. But again, here I'm admittedly old-fashioned I keep going back to Durkheim, it's awful, right? But I want to suggest that returning to this old-fashioned Durkheimian perspective might provide us with an alternative way to think about how the internet operates as a techno-spiritual system, right? That, again, I'm proposing that if online memorials are experienced in this way, it's not so much because of their ethereal nature, nor is it solely because of people's espoused religious beliefs, but rather it's because of their social nature, right? This is the very premise of Durkheim's argument in the Elementary Forms, that in the wake of loss, this site enables the bereaved to engage in a set of practices that make them feel as if they're part of something greater than themselves, and that enables them to play a very active role in ensuring the immortality of their loved ones. So, by way of a conclusion, let me confess that I'm not sure what to make of these developments yet. On the one hand, I do suspect that our culture of connectivity, digital remains, and networked selves might be generating new impulses and new needs to maintain connections with the dead. After all, we live in a world where the presence of absence is not necessarily synonymous with the absence of presence, and where our digital habitus continually prompts us to maintain connections with others. For instance, nomophobia, the fear of being disconnected from one's cell phone, is now a recognized modern ailment, right? Moreover, as other scholars have proposed, social media and communication technologies may be contributing to the sense that in the digital age, the dead do live on as an animated presence that is sustained by the contribution of online others. I'm almost done, right? On the other hand, however, there's something that seems quite familiar in all of this. After all, the ethnological record is replete with examples from around the world where human beings tried to dialogue with, and in my second sense, with the dead. And viewed from this comparative perspective, these practices strike me not so much as the product of a novel impulse or need generated by a digitally dominated society, but rather they appear as part of a widely shared human attempt to deal with some enduring existential dilemmas. Perhaps further research could help identify what the salient similarities and differences are. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jenny. We've got time for 2-3 questions. Yeah, we've got Lavender, Karina. Yeah.
Am I first?
Depends on how long the questions are.
Yeah, thanks for your presentation. It's a very brilliant and provocative presentation, despite that you don't have PowerPoint. Okay, I should start my question. You really remind me one of the case of my interviewee. You know, she shut down all the support, as in she did not all the support, shut down the cell phone because she doesn't want other people to support her. She said that you're not the one who know that person. Yeah, and you are not supposed to support me because of your knowledge of my experiences. Mm-hmm. But in the end, she also reported that she went to the online forum who had the same experiences with her, and she received a lot of supporting emails that actually makes her think it helped her. You know, so your example of, because I also feel this kind of online commemoration a little bit creepy. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but people are getting benefit from that. And you mentioned that it's not really about their ethereal nature, it's really about their social nature. That sometimes, maybe in the future, online memorials can be like Facebook. We feed our egos or feed our social needs by the likes or comments that we get. Yeah, no, this is more like the comments or something. Yeah, I didn't wish to give any feedback on that. It's a good.
Well, I do think that because grief is still taboo in our society, that these online forums are providing people with an important service, that it is giving them a space to talk about their feelings and to come together with others. I also think that there's something really interesting more generally going on the internet, where communities are being forged around emotions and feelings and shared affect. And it's becoming the actual basis. Bereavement has become a basis for community building. And I think that there's something perhaps new about that, right? And previously we were a community because we belonged to the same nation, the same village, the same tribe. And part of what I find so interesting about this whole phenomenon is that it seems that emotional experiences, pain and suffering particularly, have become the platform through which people create social bonds. So I don't know if there's a lot to that.
Karina?
So, very interesting. I really like it, and I think in a way you added something to the lack of slides by your fascinating energy. So, early on when we started talking, I was thinking, okay, so disclosure of emotion and writing therapy has been here around for a long time. If people really are looking for that, they might as well write in a journal. So why do they choose to write online? I think you started to unpack that a little bit. Writing online is writing for an audience. So I think it's the idea of audience, performance, and authenticity
Mhm.
came to me. And then maybe you can like to answer that, and also how much people actually are being read.
Right.
I mean, I can see we are going from being pure consumer to being pure creation of content,
Mhm.
and not everybody can write, and nobody has time to read.
Mhm.
So that would be another dimension. So probably the first one about authenticity, and then maybe about.
Well, the first thing I would say is that I want to emphasize there are clear and serious limitations to this method, right? You can gather all sorts of interesting data from the internet, but it's not a substitute for actually talking to people and hearing about their experiences and putting in the hours and getting to know them and being able to sit down with a woman and say, what kind of work does this do to you? You go to your husband's grave, you visit, you put flowers, you write a letter, and then you go home and you're at the computer. But part of what I think is going on, this is why somebody I'm sure is writing about the whole idea of digital habitus. If not, they should be. But I think that we have become so conditioned. When you listen to the testimonial, the woman is saying, I have a place. I can come here and talk to my sister, right? She could talk to her in her bathroom, but she's not. And I think part of what's going on is that in our world where we're constantly connected and plugged into our computers now, we have become habituated to using that as a space for communicating. And I don't know exactly what kind of work it's doing that visiting the grave doesn't. I need funding so I can do the research for this.
Yay!
Come on,
NSF! We've got 5 more questions and 3 more minutes. So I would like to take all those 5 questions, but let you answer over lunch. So,
okay, perfect.
So then we record them. People can have conversations, and it also depends a little bit on the length of the question.
Durkheim, nothing wrong with Durkheim, but surely this is mechanical solidarity, not organic solidarity. Also, at least 2 sociologists that are familiar around these parts, Bauman, liquid life, liquid modernity,
Yes.
light cloak, the light cloaks of identity rather than the heavy iron cages of identity.
Mm-hmm.
John Urry,
Yes.
Sociology Beyond Societies, the widespread extension of weak ties, Granovetter's weak ties rather
Yes.
than the strong ties of face-to-face community, etc., etc. And just thoughts rather than questions.
Jakob?
Can I just say one thing to that?
You can.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, this is part of also the problem that, with Durkheim's whole theory of solidarity, it really is predicated upon people actually coming together in real shared physical space. It's so much about embodied experience, creating that collective effervescence. And so one of the things that I think is interesting to think about is how is what's going on online similar and different? And there are clearly differences, important ones. Yeah.
Jakob?
Yeah, I love oh, never mind about that. Writing online is writing for an audience, or there will be an audience, but does it really matter in these cases? Does it matter that the posts maybe are not read since they are addressed to the deceased? What do you think? I mean,
Well, I think people could say they're not really communicating. Oh, sorry.
No,
I'll do it later.
Okay, Imogen?
Yeah, well, I've got lots of questions. I'll try and answer one. I'm interested also in the specificity of the medium of the forum and the interaction on the audience elements that have been raised and the questions that raises. One question it raises for me is, where is emotion? So is emotion somehow inside the person and somehow then expressed in the forum? Or might we understand emotion as being produced within the forum, in interactions in the forum, but also in the act of writing in the forum? And how is emotion shaped by the medium? So it's more trying to think about how emotions are being constituted in that space.
Mm-hmm.
So research on hate crime, for example, online, shows how actually it's an accumulation of kind of extreme forms of effective response that build up a kind of highly charged sort of hatred online. But that person might have felt quite reasonable before they went online and joined in the experience of participating in the forum. So how is the forum producing the emotion is one question. Another question for me is the question of the confessional and where Foucault and post-Foucauldian work might come into this. So
in Foucault's work, the confessional, which appears to be a kind of liberatory form where you speak or confess yourself, you know, that you're liberated by being able to speak about your experiences in great detail, is also for him, you know, a very dark form of governmentality related to power and social control. So were the elements of the confession actually not relate to kind of liberation of experience, but also to forms of what might be forms of social control, and online, of course, forms of surveillance as well. So it's just a kind of I've got a set of questions around that are not just in response to your talk, but in response to being here this morning.
Those are great.
I think we'll be busy.
Mine is very quick because it's just a couple of references for what you guys were saying about interviewing people. So I don't know if you've come across Elaine Caskett's work before. So for both of you, she's a clinical psychologist. She's done work interviewing people that have been struggling with this or working with this in an area. So she's done in-depth psychological interviews. She's got 2 articles on the area. She might be still working on it, I don't know. Continuing Bonds in the Age of Social Networking and Bereavement Care, and Being Towards Death in the Digital Age, Existential Analysis. And she's very interested in that kind of existential dimension. So might be a good conversation, might be interesting to read. Just wanted to flag it up. Elaine Caskett. She has a very specific, appropriate name. Professional appropriate name.
Great, thank you very much, Jenny. And do you want to come and start the debate?